Good morning, friends. Welcome back to Monday Morning Quiz number 6. It's been 5 good editions where I had interactions with many respondents from many parts of the country. We also had some international responses in the last edition. So really happy to be in front of you with another edition of this Monday Morning Quiz. I think most of you will now be familiar with the rules, but still, as a message to those who have just logged in for the first time, this Monday morning quiz, this is a set of 3 statements that you'll have in every edition of alternate Mondays. So this is the 6th edition. So this will be published on the 23rd of August, which is today. And the results of this, you have a chance to respond to these 3 statements, whether they are true or false, through the Google form, which is available in the description of this YouTube video. And the top 3, the first 3 respondents with correct answers for all the 3 statements will be declared as winners in the following Monday, which is on the 30th of August. Right. So that's how the rules of the game is. And as always, in every quiz, there are 3 parts to it. First is we discuss the answers of the previous quiz, which is MMQ5, and then we declare the winners of that quiz. And then the most important part of the 3 statements for this particular edition of Monday Morning Quiz number 6 will be published. So with these few words, without wasting much of your time, let's move on to this. So let me share my screen again. And let's look at the Monday morning quiz. Okay, so here is Monday morning quiz number 6, dated 23rd August 2021 from PQSI. So here we move on to the answers for the previous quiz. These are the 3 statements that we asked you on 9th of August 2021 as part of Nanda's MMQ number 5. Okay, so let me read out these as we explain each statement. These are the 3 statements, and you are supposed to declare whether the statement is true or false. So let me explain the first statement. The first statement is the observations mentioned in the calibration certificate issued by an accredited laboratory is valid till the next calibration. So this was the statement. And the correct answer is this statement is false. Okay, so the explanation is all calibration certificate issued by accredited labs. If you have a chance to look at it, you should probably have a look at it. It will have a statement either at some portion of the certificates. Some of them printed at the reverse of the certificate, and some calibration lab printed at the bottom of the certificate. And the statement says the results declared are valid only at the time of calibration, and this is a mandatory requirement. If it is an enabled accredited laboratory, this is a mandatory requirement. The reason why it's a mandatory requirement is because nobody can guarantee that the same is valid for a year or 6 months or even for 1 more day. Because as you all know, the measuring instrument can undergo some disturbances. Maybe it is dropped somewhere on the en route from the calibration laboratory to the user end. It could have gone through some changes also. So that's the reason it's a mandatory requirement as part of the ISO 17025 that all calibration certificates must have a statement that the results declared are valid only at the time of calibration. And that's primarily why we always recommend to everyone to do interim checks. Calibration is like taking your bike or car for service. Okay, so while it is important to take your bike or car for service, it does not guarantee you safe driving for the next 3 months or 6 months, because that's something dependent on the usage, depending on the way it was handled, depending on who drives it. Similarly, calibration also is a mandatory activity, but it does not guarantee that the instrument or the gauge will perform in the same manner throughout its validity period. And this is the reason primarily that calibration labs have been asked specifically, and it's a mandatory requirement that they should declare this statement. It should be printed on the certificate. So many times I often see that most of the people who use these measuring instruments, they feel it is calibrated, it is valid for 6 months. Actually, would like to caution them, It is not. I mean, it could undergo some disturbances maybe within a week or within 2 weeks. So how do we manage it? That's when we want you to do interim checks, or in MSA study, a stability study to check whether everything is okay, whether the measurement system is stable. Okay, so the correct answer for the statement is false, and 53% of the respondents got this question correctly, right? So that's the additional information we have included in this edition. From this edition onwards, I would like to give you some data insights on the response that I received. So moving on to the second statement. The second statement is, while conducting a bias study, okay, a bias study as part of a measurement system analysis study, while conducting a bias study, the bias is declared significant when both the UCL bias and LCL bias values are positive, right? So here is an output from GaugePack software. In fact, the greatness of the software is it tells you by a color code whether the bias is significant or not significant. In fact, for those who are doing MSA study, I would strongly recommend that if they want to become an expert in MSA, then they should know something about hypothesis testing. And that's why, we actually run a separate program on hypothesis testing. But nevertheless, most of the times it so appears that people who do MSA study are not familiar with hypothesis testing. And so that is why softwares like GaugePack will help you. For those who are not familiar with hypothesis testing, it gives you an indication that, it gives you a color-coded output. An interpretation is done by the software by the form of a color code. And that's why I really like GaugePack for its MSA, the way in which it gives the user all the relevant information. It interprets the data, it interprets the results, and gives the user a clear indication. So if you look at these two pictures that I've just taken the screenshots from GaugePack software. The first picture talks about, on the left-hand side where there's a green color, it talks about that the bias is not significant. Incidentally, this is the same example that you probably would have seen in the MSA 4th edition AIAG manual. So it's the same example. The output from GaugePack gives the same result, that the bias is not significant. So if you look at the bottom of that statement, the UCL bias and LCL bias, you see the UCL bias is a positive value, which is 0.1214. I'm just looking, I want you to focus at the bottom of each window. So there's a UCL bias for the first case is 0.1214, which is a positive value. And then the LCL bias is a negative value, which is minus 0.1061. And the bias is not significant because 0 lies in between that. So that's the interpretation. The interpretation is 0. If the 0 lies in between these two bounces, as we call it, the UCL bias and the LCL bias, then the bias is not significant. For those who are familiar with the p-value, the famous p-value method, the p-value greater than 0.05, the p-value is 0.8048 in this case, which means that the bias is not significant. Okay, for those who are familiar with hypothesis testing, this is a one sample t-test, and that's the p-value method. But the question is talking about UCL bias and LCL bias. So if you look at case 1 where the bias is not significant and GaugePack shows it with a green flag that it is acceptable, you can use the gauge. So where the UCL bias and LCL bias are positive and negative values. If you look at it on the right hand side, you have an output of another study where it shows a pink color, which means significant. Okay, the bias is significant. And if you look at those UCL bias and LCL bias values, both are positive values. Okay, so which means 0 is not in between the two. And that is why it shows significant. And if you, for those who are familiar with the p-value method, if you look at the p-value, it is also 0.01434, which is less than 0.05. And that's why it is also, it rejects the null hypothesis, and so bias is significant. So this is the answer for this question. The correct answer is yes, it is true that bias is declared significant when both UCL bias and LCL values are positive, or they are both negative also. If for those who are who want to get more information, either if it's all a positive or all a negative, which means 0 is not in between. So that's how it is interpreted in the MSA manual. So 37% got it right. Of course, I understand that, although people do bias studies, I think, the greater understanding of this calls for some knowledge of hypothesis testing. And that's why probably I was expecting a very low score here. And, I think, those who are those who would like to probably want to know more about what exactly happens in this study as part of MSA 4th edition, I would recommend them to get acquainted with hypothesis testing. Okay, so question number 2, the statement, question number 2, the correct answer is true. 37% got it right. So moving on to question number 3. To calculate PPPPK, estimated standard deviation is used. Well, I thought this was a very straightforward question, and the correct answer is false. And I was actually expecting a much higher percentage of people getting it right. But I probably anticipated a much higher percentage, close to about 70-75%. But the reality is only 42% of the respondents got it right. Okay, so probably the definition of estimated standard deviation and actual standard deviation needs to be better understood, is what I felt. Because by calculating PPPPK, we use the actual standard deviation, which is square root upon summation of x minus x bar the whole square divided by n minus 1. So that's the formula we use, and that's what is called actual standard deviation or histogram-based standard deviation. And while calculating CPCPK, we use estimated standard deviation, which is R bar by D2. So estimated standard deviation formula is R bar by D2, and a few people call it as the control chart based standard deviation. So that's what we use when we calculate CP and CPK. But when we calculate PP and PPK, which is normally done in preliminary process capability, so we use the actual standard deviation or the histogram based standard deviation. So the correct answer is actually false, and 42% got it right. So now I'm happy to share with the winner who got all these 3 questions correctly. The winner of this edition of MMQ05 is, of course, I got good amount of responses, but there were many who got only 2 answers correctly. I think most of them got the last one, which I expected to have a better performance. We couldn't get it, but nevertheless, as always, I have 1 winner. This time, I would have probably been happy to get another 2, but nevertheless, we can probably, of course, as I told you earlier, the whole idea of MMQ is not about winning the quiz. It's more about another way of every week you get some additional information about tools like MSA, SPC, and calibration management, where a lot of practical insights are missing. Okay, so people do understand the theory part of it, but when they actually bring it to the shop floor, the day-to-day activities, there are some nitty-gritties, and somewhere it has been wrongly interpreted. So that's the idea. Nevertheless, congratulations to Sirasuddin A, the Associate Manager QA of Apollo Tyres Limited in Chennai. So he was the only person to get all these 3 statements answered correctly in this MMQ05. Nevertheless, I expect probably the following quizzes, I will have at least 3 winners, or if not more. Okay, the more the better, right? So let me, I'm sure most of you will be waiting, to respond first with the MMQ06. And in fact, the last time when I released MMQ05 video, they were, within the first 10 minutes itself, we could get responses, a lot of responses. And, in fact, my colleague even, asked me, we need to be careful, but I said, that's the game. So anyway, fastest finger first. So I understand your anxiety, and more and more people getting in. I'm very happy. So without, let me not, keep you on hold for a longer time. Let me declare the 3 statements for MMQ6 dated 23rd August 2021. So 3 statements, and you just have to use the Google form in the description section to fill it up and say whether it's true or false. Statement number 1, the ISO gum method is used to evaluate measurement uncertainty during calibration or testing. Statement number 2, while conducting MSA for attribute measurement systems, the kappa values depend on the samples selected. Statement number 3, a process with CPK value of 1.67 can be termed as a 5 sigma quality process. Okay, these are the 3 statements. So take a look at them. take your time. So anyway, I mean, the forms will be open until next Sunday. So take your time. At the same time, of course, there is always a fastest finger first. So, but some questions sometimes are little tricky. You may, so take a step back, think about it, and then share your answers. And so I really look forward to your responses in the Google form. And seriously, I think this is going to be uh, as it gets more and more trickier. I'm also searching for more questions, and I probably intend to. I also need your feedback on what type of questions that you want. I mean, these are topics which I'm very familiar with, and that's how I have. So slowly, I will add more topics. Probably some questions on Pocoyoke, some questions on FMEA, and things like that. So for the time being, it is going to be STC, MSA, and calibration. So more about process variation and measurement variation. Do let me have your feedback, because I have my colleagues, Vinod, who are there are colleagues who are very good at FMEA, lean, and all that. If you want to slowly, so we will slowly add more questions to MMQ, and this is going to be, as I mean, we'll try to continue as long as it can. I'm just waiting for the 25th MMQ or the 50th MMQ and the 100th MMQ, and possibly when situations are better, and hopefully when we see off this COVID pandemic, we can probably have a get together of all the winners together, an in-person get together. That will be wonderful. And I'm also expecting, my book to also be released very soon, and probably book reviews, chapter reviews, and all that is what I'm planning. So I'm actually planning to be in touch with the quality fraternity to make sure that we all understand the concepts very clearly. They are very simple, but practically there are some nitty-gritties when you actually implement, and that's what we are in for. Winning is not the only criteria here, so please continue. I really appreciate a few respondents who continue to respond in all the quizzes. Maybe they get one question wrong, or sometimes two, or sometimes all three, but they continue to try. I'm sure they'll be able to learn more and more. And that's what is when we cross 50 quizzes or 100 quizzes. And if you've been following all those quizzes, and they're all available in the YouTube channel, so if you continue to view them, and if you're able to get it, I'm sure you will be a much better quality professional. And India needs good quality professionals, good quality professionals, and that's what will help us to make a big impact in the global value chain. So thank you so much for watching this video. Eagerly look forward to your responses, and take care. And I wish you all good health, happiness, and prosperity. Thank you so much. Bye for now. Signing off. This is Nanda from PQSI for Monday Morning Quiz. Thanks.